A dusty radio crackles in Montgomery, Alabama, 1952. The song playing stops mid-verse. The DJ's voice breaks. Hank Williams has been found dead in his Cadillac at age 29. Yet in just 6 years of recording, this troubled genius had already written 167 songs, with 35 reaching the top 10. Deep in Butler County, Alabama, September 17, 1923, Hiram King Williams entered the world in a small farmhouse. Born into poverty during the height of the cotton economy's decline, young Hank's early life reflected the harsh realities of the rural South. His father, Lon Williams, a World War I veteran, spent most of Hank's childhood in veterans' hospitals, battling injuries and mental trauma that left him largely absent from his son's life. The burden of raising young Hank fell to his mother, Lillie. A fierce, determined woman, she played the organ at Mount Olive West Baptist Church and ran boarding houses in Georgiana and later Montgomery, instilling in her son both musical appreciation and an iron-clad work ethic. Those boarding houses became Hank's first stages, where he'd entertain tenants with his growing repertoire of songs. At age 6, while other children played freely, doctors discovered Hank had spina bifida occulta, a painful spinal condition that would shadow his entire life. The constant ache forced young Hank to find solace in music. During sleepless nights, he'd sit by the radio, absorbing every note and lyric, teaching himself to channel his pain into something beautiful. The streets of Georgiana brought him to Rufus T-Tot Payne, a Blackstreet musician who would change the course of music history. Despite the rigid segregation of 1930s Alabama, Payne saw something special in the skinny white boy who couldn't stop watching him play. For 3 years, they met in secret, with Hank paying for lessons with money earned shining shoes and selling peanuts. Payne taught him more than just blues guitar techniques. He showed Hank how to make a guitar cry, how to bend notes until they broke hearts, and most importantly, how to turn personal pain into universal truth. Every Sunday, Mount Olive West Baptist Church echoed with young Hank's voice. Standing on worn wooden pews, he'd lead the congregation in hymns, developing the powerful, emotion-laden delivery that would later define country music. The gospel influence seeped into his bones, teaching him how to move a crowd from celebration to tears and back again. By 14, Williams had formed his first band, the Drifting Cowboys. They played anywhere that would have them: furniture, store openings, gas stations, street corners, county fairs. His mother, Lillie, drove them between gigs in her station wagon, acting as manager, booking agent, and stern taskmaster. She'd collect money in a cup while Hank's distinctive voice filled small-town radio stations across Alabama, each performance a battle against his ever-present back pain. In those early years, young Hank developed what he called his medicine, a dangerous mix of alcohol and pain pills that temporarily dulled his physical agony. It seemed harmless at first, just enough to get through the long hours of standing on makeshift stages. No one could have known this crude self-medication would eventually lead to his downfall. 1937 marked his first real breakthrough. At the Empire Theater in Montgomery, 14-year-old Hank entered a talent show. The audience fell silent as this lanky teenager stepped up to the microphone. When he opened his mouth to sing, the raw emotion in his voice stunned the crowd. He won first prize, $5 and something far more valuable: the absolute certainty that he was born to perform. That voice would soon reach far beyond Montgomery, but the bright lights of fame would cast some very dark shadows. 1939 marked the beginning of Hank's regional radio career at WSFA in Montgomery. Each weekday at noon, his voice crackled through receivers across Alabama. The 15-minute show, sponsored by a local herb medicine company, paid $15 a week, enough to keep the Drifting Cowboys together. 6 days a week, he'd leave the boarding house before dawn, carrying his guitar through empty streets to reach the studio. His mother, Lillie, ensured he never missed a show, even on mornings when the back pain left him barely able to walk. At WSFA, station breaks became impromptu songwriting sessions. Between broadcasts, Hank would sit in the corner, scribbling lyrics on paper bags and envelopes. The constant deadline pressure of daily radio taught him to write fast and direct, a skill that would later define his songwriting style. The station's reach extended into rural communities across 3 states, building a grassroots following that would prove crucial to his later success. It was during one of these radio shows that Audrey Shepard first saw him perform. A bold, ambitious woman with a young daughter from her first marriage, Audrey walked into the studio one day and changed his life. Despite her limited musical talent, she saw in Hank a rocket she could ride to fame. They married in 1944 at a Texaco station in Andalusia, Alabama, with the ceremony performed by a justice of the peace who doubled as the station owner. The witness was a mechanic who wiped the grease off his hands before signing the marriage certificate. Audrey became more than his wife. She was his manager, booking agent, and insisted on being his duet partner despite listeners' complaints about her singing. She pushed Hank harder than Lillie ever had, driving him to seek bigger stages and broader audiences. Under her guidance, the Drifting Cowboys transformed from a ragtag group of local musicians into a polished touring band. They traveled the Southeast in a second-hand Packard sedan, playing any venue that would pay: dance halls, theaters, county fairs, barn dances. The car doubled as a hotel on nights they couldn't afford rooms. 1946 brought Hank to Nashville, the beating heart of country music. He caught the attention of Fred Rose, a seasoned music publisher who recognized the raw genius in Hank's songwriting. Rose became his mentor, teaching him to refine his natural talent without losing the emotional authenticity that made his songs special. Their first session together produced Move It On Over, Hank's first national hit that blended country themes with a driving rhythm that presaged rock and roll. The success of Move It On Over earned him a spot on Louisiana Hayride, a radio show broadcast from Shreveport that rivaled the Grand Ole Opry. Every Saturday night, his performances reached millions of homes across the South and Midwest. The Hayride's audience witnessed the emergence of his signature style, that soul-piercing yodel that could make a love song soar or a sad song cut straight to the heart. His fellow performers nicknamed him the Drifting Cowboy for his habit of wandering the halls between sets, guitar in hand, working out new songs. By 1949, Hank had earned country music's highest honor, an invitation to join the Grand Ole Opry. His debut performance of Lovesick Blues brought the typically reserved Opry audience to its feet, demanding 6 encores. Roy Acuff, the king of country music, watched from the wings and reportedly said, "That boy has something none of the rest of us have." That night, he wasn't just another singer on the Opry stage. He was a revelation, showing Nashville what country music could be when raw emotion met poetic truth. The bright lights of the Opry stage illuminated his talent, but cast dangerous shadows across his personal life. Shadows that would soon threaten everything he'd built. In the small back room of Nashville's Castle recording studios, Hank Williams created his masterpieces. The studio itself was primitive by today's standards, a converted hotel room with egg cartons nailed to the walls for soundproofing. The single RCA 44BX microphone picked up every creak of the wooden floors, every breath between phrases. Fred Rose insisted on recording Hank in this sparse environment, knowing that technical perfection mattered less than emotional truth. His songwriting process defied convention. While other artists labored for weeks over lyrics, Hank often wrote his biggest hits in less than an hour. Cold, Cold Heart emerged during a morning studio session when Fred Rose asked if he had anything new. Hank pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, smoothed it out, and proceeded to record one of country music's most influential songs. Steel guitarist Don Helms recalled the room falling silent as Hank performed it for the first time, everyone present knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Between 1947 and 1952, he wrote at a furious pace. Songs poured out of him in hotel rooms, on tour buses, during radio shows. Move It On Over, written in the back of his Packard between shows, introduced a driving rhythm that helped bridge the gap between country and the emerging rock and roll sound. Jambalaya, on the Bayou, captured the spirit of Louisiana culture in a way that crossed regional boundaries, becoming a hit not just in the South but across the entire country. Dear John became a turning point. Written during a particularly turbulent period with Audrey, the song's raw honesty connected with audiences in a way country music hadn't before. It wasn't just about lost love, it was about the specific pain of reading a goodbye letter, of recognizing your own failures in someone else's handwriting. The song spent 14 weeks at #1, establishing Hank's reputation as country music's premier storyteller. 1951 marked his creative peak. In a single 12-month period, he released Your Cheatin' Heart, Hey Good Lookin', and I Can't Help It, If I'm Still in Love with You. Each song showcased his gift for turning personal experience into universal truth. Tony Bennett's version of Cold Cold Heart topped the pop charts for 6 weeks, proving that Hank's songs could transcend genre boundaries. Even Frank Sinatra, initially skeptical of country music, recorded a version of Your Cheatin' Heart, calling it one of the most honest songs I've ever sung. The recording of I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry demonstrated his unique approach to studio work. After several failed attempts to capture the right mood, Hank ordered everyone out of the studio except steel guitarist Don Helms. In near darkness, with only the single microphone, he delivered the performance that would become his signature recording. The sparse arrangement highlighted every crack and quaver in his voice, creating an atmosphere of almost unbearable intimacy. Leonard Bernstein later described it as a work of art on the level of Schubert's best songs. His innovative approach broke with country music tradition. While his contemporaries relied on familiar themes and stock phrases, Hank drew from a deeper well: personal experience, blues structures learned from Rufus Payne, and an unflinching willingness to explore emotional darkness. Songs like Lost Highway weren't just about traveling. They explored the spiritual cost of choosing a life on the road. Mind Your Own Business challenged social hypocrisy with a directness rare for its time. In the studio, he developed techniques that would become industry standards. His use of the high lonesome sound, a blend of yodeling and blues inflections, created a new vocabulary for country vocals. The way he paired sparse instrumentation with emotionally dense lyrics proved that less could indeed be more. Even his microphone technique, standing at an angle to soften certain phrases while leaning in for emotional peaks, influenced how future artists approach recording. But perhaps his greatest innovation was his ability to collapse the distance between performer and audience. When Hank sang about heartache, listeners felt like he was telling their story, not his. This gift for universal truth-telling came at a steep personal price. Each song seemed to drain something from him, requiring deeper doses of alcohol and pills to keep performing. As producer Fred Rose noted, Hank didn't write songs, he lived them first. While his songs climbed the charts, their creator was beginning a dangerous descent. By early 1952, Hank Williams' self-destructive patterns became impossible to ignore. During a January performance at the Grand Ole Opry, he collapsed mid-song during Cold Cold Heart. His dependency on alcohol and chloral hydrate, prescribed for his chronic back pain, had transformed from a coping mechanism into a lethal spiral. The WSM radio announcer Grant Turner recalled having to fill 3 to 7 minutes of dead air when Hank couldn't make it to the microphone. Between January and August 1952, he missed 26 Opry appearances. The breaking point came after he missed 6 consecutive shows, leading to his August dismissal from country music's most prestigious stage. Behind these public failings lay a complex web of personal tragedy. His marriage to Audrey had collapsed under the weight of mutual infidelity, career pressures, and his escalating substance abuse. The divorce settlement devastated him both emotionally and financially. Audrey demanded and received half of his future royalties, $30,000 in cash, their house at Franklin Road, and custody of their son, Hank Jr. To meet these obligations, he played 127 shows in 1952 alone, each performance driven by a dangerous cocktail of substances. Doc Marshall, a self-styled doctor with no medical license, followed Hank's tours in a station wagon stocked with drugs. His medical bag contained morphine, B12 shots laced with amphetamines, chloral hydrate, and various sedatives. For $300 a week, Marshall provided vitamin shots before shows and sleep medication after. Hotel staff frequently found Hank unconscious, the floor littered with empty bottles and used syringes. Drifting cowboys adapted to their leader's instability. Steel guitarist Don Helms and bassist Cedric Rainwater developed a code system, tapping their instruments when Hank started slurring lyrics or swaying dangerously close to the edge of the stage. They carried 2 guitars to every show, one tuned normally, another tuned down half a step for nights when Hank couldn't match pitch. Rainwater's notebook listed 15 different substitute performers, any of whom might be called at a moment's notice when their boss was too incapacitated to perform. Yet even in decline, his creative power remained startling. At a June session at Castle Studios, he recorded Your Cheatin' Heart in a single take, his voice cracking with emotion. Take These Chains from My Heart and Cowliga emerged from marathon recording sessions fueled by anxiety and insomnia. Each performance became a high-wire act. At the Louisiana Hayride reunion show in September, he delivered a version of Jambalaya that brought 3,000 people to their feet. The next night in Houston, he never made it past the dressing room. October 1952 brought his marriage to Billie Jean Jones, staged as 2 public ceremonies at the New Orleans Civic Auditorium. 8,000 people paid $3.50 each to attend the 8 p.m. ceremony, with another 6,000 for the 11 p.m. repeat performance. The money went straight to Audrey's lawyers. His new manager, Oscar Davis, immediately booked him for 42 shows in 45 days across Texas and Oklahoma. Ignoring desperate warnings from band members about Hank's deteriorating condition, Fred Rose, his longtime producer, watched in horror as Hank's voice weakened during his final recording sessions. Once powerful enough to fill auditoriums without amplification, it had become thin and strained. Yet somehow this deterioration added another layer of authenticity to songs about loss and suffering. As session musician Jerry Rivers noted, he didn't sound like a man singing about pain anymore. He sounded like pain itself. Throughout this period, his mother Lillie tried repeatedly to intervene. She rented an apartment near the Opry, stocked it with home-cooked meals, and begged promoters to cancel shows. She remembered the frail boy who'd survived childhood illness and wanted to protect him still. But Hank, trapped in a cycle of addiction, performances, and mounting financial pressures, couldn't or wouldn't stop. When she made one plea for him to rest in December 1952, he replied with words that would prove prophetic. "If I rest, I rust." On December 30th, 1952, he climbed into his blue Cadillac for a series of New Year's shows, unaware he was beginning his final journey. December 30th, 1952 dawned cold and rainy in Montgomery. Hank Williams climbed into his powder blue 1952 Cadillac, driven by college student Charles Carr. The 19-year-old had been hired for $400 to chauffeur Hank to shows in Charleston, West Virginia, and Canton, Ohio. The National Weather Service warned of severe snow across Tennessee, but Oscar Davis insisted the shows must go on. There was a $3,500 guarantee at stake. Hank's condition was already precarious. At 10:45 a.m., before leaving Montgomery, he received 2 shots from Doc Marshall, vitamin B12 laced with amphetamines for energy, and morphine for his chronic back pain. He carried 6 chloral hydrate tablets in his jacket pocket, and a bottle of bonded bourbon sat on the Cadillac's back seat. The temperature had dropped to 35 degrees, and sleet pelted the windshield. The first signs of trouble appeared in Birmingham at 3:30 p.m. During a stop for gas, Hank became agitated, his speech slurring. Dr. P.H. Cardwell was called to their room at the Redmont Hotel, where he administered more morphine to calm his nerves. By the time they reached Knoxville at 10:45 p.m., winter weather had made the roads treacherous. Ice covered the highways, and visibility dropped to near zero. At the Andrew Johnson Hotel, porters had to carry Hank to room 301. Night clerk Marcel Duprist later reported hearing violent coughing from Hank's room throughout the evening. When Carr checked on him at 11:00 p.m., Hank declined food, asking only for water and his medicine. Carr witnessed him take 2 chloral hydrate tablets before falling into a fitful sleep. This was the last time anyone saw him conscious. At 6:30 a.m., when Carr and 2 porters helped him back to the Cadillac, Hank was wrapped in his heavy blue overcoat, completely unresponsive but breathing. As they crossed into Virginia, the weather deteriorated further. At 7:45 a.m., Carr stopped at Burger's Drive-In in Bristol, attempting to rouse his passenger for coffee. When he returned to the car, he noticed Hank's hand had fallen from beneath his coat. It felt ice cold to the touch. Fighting panic, he drove straight to Oak Hill, West Virginia, pulling into Pure Oil Station at 7:30 a.m. Station attendant Glenn Burdett checked the back seat and immediately called for medical help. Oak Hill police officer Howard Janney arrived first, followed by Dr. Diego Nunari. At 7:54 a.m. on January 1st, 1953, in the back seat of his beloved Cadillac, Hank Williams was pronounced dead. The official cause, according to Dr. Nunari's report, acute right heart failure brought on by a lethal combination of alcohol, chloral hydrate, and morphine. He was 29 years old. The news broke first on WCKY Cincinnati. Within hours, radio stations across the South interrupted regular programming to play his songs continuously. WSFA Montgomery played nothing but Hank's music for 52 straight hours. The Opry dedicated its entire January 3rd broadcast to his memory, with Red Foley and Ernest Tubb performing emotional renditions of his greatest hits. His funeral at Montgomery's Municipal Auditorium on January 4th drew 345 people, the largest crowd in the city's history. Thousands more stood in freezing rain outside. Inside, his silver casket sat center stage, his Gibson guitar placed at its foot. Audrey, Billie Jean, and Lillie sat in separate sections, each claiming the right to grieve as his one true love. The service lasted 4 hours, featuring performances of I Saw the Light, Peace in the Valley, and Beyond the Sunset. The funeral procession to Oakwood Cemetery stretched for 3 miles. Police estimated that 52,000 people lined the streets. 25,000 floral arrangements arrived, including wreaths from Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, and the entire Grand Ole Opry cast. His tomb, designed by Lillie, featured musical notes carved in marble and the inscription, I Saw the Light. As the last mourners left Oakwood Cemetery that evening, they couldn't have known they were witnessing not just an ending, but a beginning, the transformation of a man into an American legend. In the decades following his death, Hank Williams's influence has only grown stronger. His songs have been recorded over 20,000 times, from Bob Dylan's raw take on I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry to Ray Charles's soulful version of Your Cheatin' Heart. Johnny Cash often said that every country songwriter since has lived in the shadow of Hank's genius. The numbers tell part of the story. 35 top 10 singles, 11 #1 hits, and induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame's first class in 1961. But Hank's true legacy lies in how he transformed country music from a regional genre into a national art form. Before him, country songs often relied on familiar formulas. After him, emotional authenticity became the genre's gold standard. His songwriting technique influenced artists far beyond country music. Leonard Cohen studied his lyrics while crafting Hallelujah. Bruce Springsteen cited Lost Highway as inspiration for Born to Run. Even jazz musicians like Keith Jarrett have recorded entire albums of Williams covers, finding sophisticated chord progressions hidden beneath the seemingly simple melodies. The childhood pain that shaped his music created ripples across generations. His son, Hank Williams Jr., emerged from his father's shadow to become a country music legend in his own right. His grandson, Hank Williams III, brings elements of his grandfather's sound to alternative country music. The Williams family story continues to evolve, each generation adding new chapters to the legacy. His final resting place in Montgomery has become a pilgrimage site for musicians and fans alike. Bob Dylan visited in 1963, leaving a guitar pick on the grave. Decades later, Jack White made the same journey, later saying, "Every songwriter worth their salt eventually comes to pay respects at this marble marker." Townes Van Zandt even spent his last dollars traveling to Williams' grave, believing the visit would help him write better songs. Perhaps most remarkably, Hank Williams's music continues finding new audiences. Each generation discovers him anew, drawn to the timeless quality of his storytelling. His songs appear in film soundtracks, TV shows, and commercials. Modern country stars still name-check him in their lyrics. His influence echoes through indie folk, Americana, and even hip-hop as artists sample and reimagine his work. In 2023, 70 years after his death, Your Cheatin' Heart and I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry still receive regular radio play. New box sets and previously unreleased recordings continue to emerge. Music scholars analyze his lyrics in university classrooms, while young guitarists learn his songs as rites of passage. The tragic irony remains. Hank Williams died believing he was a failure, his career in ruins. He couldn't have known that his 29 years of struggle would produce a body of work that would help define American music. As his mother Lillie once said, God gave him a gift. The gift killed him, but the music lives on. If you found this story of talent, tragedy, and lasting influence meaningful, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the artists who shaped American music.